My castaway this week is David Tennant. His brilliance in portraying Doctor Who has defined the Time Lord for a generation of children, and indeed redefined it for parents, who up until he took over had thought the only real Doctor Who was in possession of a mop of curls and a long stripy scarf. Raffish, dynamic, solitary and daring, his Saturday evening intergalactic adventures have secured BBC One blockbusting figures, and the actor himself, the sort of household name status normally reserved for Premiership footballers and rock stars. Yet, despite being voted the best Doctor Who of all time, he says, "I always have that Presbyterian voice in my head saying, could do better." But, he admits, I quite like that. You don't give interviews very often, I don't think, David Tennant.
I do a lot of interviews, but I tend to stick to the light-hearted, frothy stuff. I don't do many interviews like this often, no.
OK, and that is just to try to preserve a part of you that's not the Doctor and is not out there all the time.
I think so, yes.
OK.
Shall I leave now?
Sorry. The walking down the street stuff, I mean, I said Premiership footballers and rock stars. It's true, isn't it? You do inhabit that very particular area of fame. Do you walk down the street on your own?
I certainly do.
On your own?
Yes, but I often with a hat and keeping moving. Yes.
Right, so it's not making eye contact. And
that helps, yes. But you can't pick and choose the elements that you would like to experience. And I wouldn't have given up the experience of doing this show and being involved in this show for anything in the world. It's been the most wonderful 4 years I could imagine. And to an extent, I was doing it for my 8-year-old self, you know, who had loved this show and had grown up a huge, avid fan. Yeah. And that 8-year-old self is still a huge part of who I am now. So I think I felt the responsibility not to break it. I certainly feel very proud and relieved that it didn't go wrong on my watch.
When you come into contact, I'm sure this must happen to you all the time, with those beaming little 8, 9, 10-year-old faces just staring at you. Are you sort of looking back at yourself when you see their eyes and see what it means to them?
Yeah, it's quite overwhelming, actually. The sort of things that kids sometimes say to you and you think, oh, that's me. That's exactly how I felt. And then, of course, you think, well, I don't want to ruin this moment. I want to fulfil this moment for this little kid. And I remember meeting Tom Baker, you see.
Ah.
So
when and how and where?
In John Mingus in Glasgow. He was signing some books. And I waited in line.
Did you?
And he signed my book. I've still got it somewhere.
Did you talk to him, or where did you?
Yes, I did. I asked him about his scarf, because I was wearing the scarf that my granny had knitted me.
Right.
And I think I asked him who knitted his. He came up with some suitably surreal answer, but to be honest, I was just so gobsmacked that he was sitting there in front of me, that it was a very important life moment for little me. So you always try and remember that and try and recreate that for any young faces that might be staring up at you.
What a perfect piece of symmetry. A noticeably English Doctor Who.
I am, yes.
Did you make that choice, or was it made for you?
No, it was requested by Russell T Davies, the executive producer and writer.
It didn't bother you then? You didn't feel that it
didn't bother me at all. I thought, if that's the way you want to write it, I'm very happy to do it that way. Never occurred to me that was in any way a political issue until people started asking me about it.
Right, and you had been considered as the first Doctor Who for the new relaunch. Was that right?
No. It was Christopher Eccleston. He started the new series off, but Chris did 1 year. So I came on board for Doctor Who before it had become, because I knew I was taking over before the first series had gone out.
Oh, did you? Right.
So nobody really knew that it was going to work at all, this rebooted version of this show.
Oh, okay.
So before that year even transmitted, they knew they were looking for somebody new.
Okay. Had you watched it and thought, I'd like to get my teeth into that, I know what I could do with that?
Well, I'd watched it as a kid and thought that. What happened was Russell T Davies and Julie Gardner, the other executive producer, sat me down and said they knew that I was interested in the show. Because I'd been saying, can I get just a part in one episode? I just want to be in it. You know, it's a big thing. And they were very reluctant to ever take me up on that. I thought, they clearly don't want me in this. But they said, well, come round and have a look. We've nearly finished some of the episodes for this first series. Come round and see what you think.
Right.
And at the end of that little private screening is when they said, the thing is, we might be looking for a new Doctor. So it was the most extraordinary, unexpected night. They'd clearly stage managed the whole thing, but I didn't see it coming.
Is it true that as a child you only ever missed one episode in 9 years?
It probably is, yes.
Right. And when then, as a little boy, because it was as a little boy that you thought about acting, was it when you were watching Doctor Who?
Absolutely.
Oh, was it?
Yeah. Well, certainly that was one of the things that inspired me, because having checked up on this, I can only have been 3. So maybe I saw a repeat of this or something. But I believe I remember seeing John Pertwee turning into Tom Baker.
Right, I remember that.
Right. You're impossibly young for that, Kirsty. But
too late. You have too much of a beat today.
Sorry, but I do believe I remember that, and I remember thinking that was extraordinary.
Yes.
And then quizzing my parents about what that was, and then very quickly getting that it was what an actor was, and that these people were actors who told these stories, and just thinking that sounded like the perfect job. Which it is, really.
Is it ridiculous to talk about destiny then under these circumstances? Do you feel maybe...
Well, it's only ridiculous because I don't really believe in that, I suppose. But I confess it does seem ridiculously serendipitous that it's worked out like this.
David Tennant, we know that you wanted to be an actor from a very, very young age, maybe even as young as 3. Did your father, the minister, try to talk some sense into you at any point? Yes,
they did. They did, but I didn't really notice. But only because that's sensible.
Of course, yes.
It's a ridiculous profession to try and make a living at. My dad often talks about had the world he grew up in been slightly different, he would have quite enjoyed going into acting himself.
Of course, because there's a degree of performance in
huge,
standing up in the pulpit. A huge amount of theatricality, especially when you see the way my dad does it. They always have been to see every show that I've been in and been very supportive and hugely excited when it's been going well. So it's not that they were against it. There was certainly no, we mustn't... It's the devil's work.
Exactly,
yes.
None of that.
Right.
None of that. They just wanted me to make sure that I'd be able to feed myself.
So did they say, get a profession behind you as well as...
Yeah.
But you didn't?
I didn't, no. They were quite keen, I think, that maybe I'd get a teaching profession.
Yes.
Maybe you could be a drama teacher, just something that could pay the bills. They were quite right, but I was, young and foolish and cavalier enough to plough my own path.
So given that your parents couldn't talk you out of it, I noticed from reading that somebody who knows you very well said that you have a steeliness and an unshakable self-belief. Is that something you recognise in yourself?
Who said that?
Arabella Weir said
Did she?
Yes.
I certainly must have done as a child. When I now look back and think how unlikely it is that it all worked out, I think if I'd had a sense of that at 11 or 12, I would have probably given up on the notion. I suppose I am driven, certainly, and I'm always looking for the next job and trying to better myself, I guess.
And you auditioned for drama school, the Royal Scottish Academy of Music and Drama, when you were only 17. I mean, they normally...
16 when I auditioned.
You were 16?
Yeah, but I was 17 when I started, yeah.
Okay, and that's probably almost a year younger than anybody you would have...
I was the youngest in the school at the time.
Right.
I mean, I did this ridiculous audition. I did a bit of Hamlet at 17, not really knowing what it was about. And then I did a bit from Death of a Salesman. I played a 65-year-old man at 17. I must have been useless. And I remember you get taken into your auditions by existing students. The girl who was taking me in, a girl called Helen Reeves. And I sat there as various people came up and down the corridor, and she was chatting to them all about, you going to the pub tonight, we're doing this, we're doing that. I'm thinking, this is a world where people go to pubs. This is what student life is like. I was a very green 16-year-old. And when I went to drama school at 17, I was still a very green 17-year-old. I did a lot of growing up over 3 years.
Right. Like what? I mean, it can't just have been the pub.
Well, I was saying that my friend Alan and I used to sing that Proclaimer song.
Right. There's
a verse in the middle, this is the story of losing my virginity.
Yes.
And without us ever really discussing it, Alan just took that verse. There was a lot of things I still had to discover when I went to drama school.
Okay. Were you a shy boy?
I know I wasn't particularly shy. I just felt like I was busking all the time, like I was pretending to be much more grown up and much more worldly than I was. So yes, I caught up quite quickly. I mean, I imagine I was getting away with it. Possibly everyone at drama school was going, look at that wee boy. It's embarrassing. But he's all right, he's trying hard.